Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Film Music House Summer Edition in collaboration with the Perspective Forum on Facebook. Today I have a very special friend, a dear friend, an amazing composer named the Queen of Documentary Scoring. The subject today is finding the right tone, how music influences storytelling. And I'm so grateful to have Miriam Cutler with us today. Hello, Miriam.
Hello, Thomas. I'm so delighted to be here, always.
And before we start the workshop, and you've prepared some great videos with amazing acting, but we'll go into that later, and to show step by step how important it is to stay objective and stay true to the story in documentary filmmaking, especially, and how music can alter the outcome. But I want to talk a bit about your latest project. You were nominated 2 years ago for 2 Emmys for the new documentary category with RBG and Love Gilder. And this year you worked on the PBS documentary Flannery. And for everyone that wants to listen to the music of Flannery, we have a Spotify link to the music down in the YouTube descriptions. But Miriam, do you want to tell us a bit about the project and for people who don't know who Flannery O'Connor is?
Sure. So Flannery O'Connor was a very important American writer who lived, who was writing in probably the early 40s through and into the 50s. She lived in the South, and so she was part of that very dynamic group of writers that came out of the South, whether it was Tennessee Williams and others. And but she was by far the quirkiest. She really was kind of well known for her very eccentric characters and her take on Southern life. She pointed out a lot of the hypocrisy, a lot of the very overt racism. And so she became very important as a commentator of the times. And so there were many scholars involved in making this film. I don't believe there's been too many films done about Flannery O'Connor, even though she is such an iconic American writer. So I was really, really excited to work on the film, especially because they incorporated animation and all kinds of ways of illustrating some of her stories, and they brought them to life with some really nice voice acting, things like that. And so it was really fun. It gave me a lot to play with the music. And
you love the blues, and I think you were able to use some of that.
Yeah, I really love the blues. It was, I love slide guitar. I love a toothless old black guy playing a guitar. James Johnson not James Johnson. Anyway, all the great Southern blues guys. And so I rarely get a chance to really use any of that. And then I always, I had this idea to incorporate like a small string sound ensemble with like slide guitar and also capture, because Flannery was also, while being a very quirky and eccentric person, she was a devout Catholic. And it was very unusual. I mean, Catholics were kind of almost considered as bad as Jews in those days in the South, where she lived. So she was a bit of an outsider, and her faith was very important to her. So there's, a lot of her internal life was her struggles between, her faith, the values of her society, racism, all these things played out. Plus, she was very, very ill at a young age, and she died quite young. I think she was around 39. And so we have not as much from her as we could have, although she was quite a workaholic and considered her purpose on earth to write. And so she did up until the very end.
I still have to watch the documentary, but for anyone who wants to watch it, it's available on PBS. And as I said, the music is on Spotify, and there's a link to the music down in the YouTube description. And Miriam, we've done some workshops together all over the world. Or we were in Austria together, in Cologne. And I love you're an amazing instructor, mentor. And a few years ago, we did this workshop where we showed clips of music and then how it really influences the outcome, the emotion. And so I wanted to recreate that today. But before we go into the clips, can you talk a little bit about that and why it's so important, especially in documentary, to be super cautious with the music and how just little tone differences can make a huge difference?
Well, yeah, rather than cautious, I would say you have to be extremely intentional, because everything you do with music will affect the meaning of the footage. And so it's very important to be aligned with the vision of the director. We've got to be telling the same story. Otherwise, it just it diffuses the, you know, the power of the film. You know, people, it really dilutes it. The people don't understand the meaning. And also music, you know, there's different ways it can be used. And so you can use it as punctuation to reinforce something they're seeing, but you can also add new layers of meaning that aren't in the footage. And that's what we're going to see today. Because it's very interesting when you take a very benign piece of footage like what we did. You know, I mean, one thing I thought we might do is play it without any music and see if people know what the story is, and then play it with different cues and see how that completely changed. Is this guy a good guy? Is he evil? Is he disgusting? You know, is he someone we should like or someone we should fear? You know, all of creepy. You don't want your kids around him. So, you know, and I call that the music story arc, because sometimes the music is, like I said, reinforcing what's going on screen, and other times it's exaggerating it, like putting an exclamation point by bringing something out, really underlining it, like someone says something, wait, stop, ba-da-da-da. Now the audience is like, yeah, you know, they know what, you know, it's very intense. Or you could say, wait, stop, and the music is just not there. And so it's kind of like, you don't know what to feel. As should we be worried? You know, wait, stop could mean, oh, don't go out in the street, there's a car coming. Or it could mean, stop, you've got my purse, you know. Or it could mean, stop, you're hitting my husband. So it could mean all those things, but the music will guide us in some ways, if, you know, and it can also, he could be hitting someone and I could be playing circus music. So now it becomes a comedy. Mm-hmm. So all these things are very important, and communication between a director and a composer must be thoroughly explored and clear, because I need to understand exactly, you know, and then of course you could say, I want it to be happy. Well, happy, okay. Do you know how many nuances of happy there are? You could start here where I'm sort of, it's nice to see you. Wow, I haven't seen you in years. I can't wait till we can sit down and have a drink, you know. I mean, it can be anywhere. So that's the other thing music can do. It helps to sort of calibrate where we are emotionally, and helps the audience sort of, it either can guide them or can confuse them. Sometimes you want to confuse them and you don't want them to know. So you have this music. Maybe we're watching two men shake hands and smile, but the music makes it sound like they're trading some kind of espionage secrets, you know, or one of them has abducted the other one's kid, you know, and they're just trying to look like nothing's happening. So music has a huge effect on footage. So, you know, it's important to do a good job.
I just love, because I can't wait to see you. That's me when I see you after the COVID again, and we have.
And I know, I can't wait, man. I just can't wait.
So Miriam, let's just look at the clip without any music, just with the sound that was on the video. So here we go. So that was an Oscar-winning performance in there, I would say.
It was so nuanced. I mean, maybe this doesn't even need music because it's so clear. But actually,
just for the audience, we did that so we don't run into any right issues with studios. So we did this.
Oh well, frankly, I was looking forward to working with such an incredible actor. I just
right, yeah.
And the DP, wow.
And the screenwriter.
Oh
and
yeah, the whole thing.
You know, anything, you know. Anyway, so before we now go into the first clip, I have some questions. One, I really don't know. We always talk about temp music, but how does that work in the doc world? Is there temp music really? I
Oh
really don't
yeah.
know.
The editors, you know, especially in the doc world where editing, that's really where the actual film is made. The footage is shot, people go out and they start filming, and there's the film they think they're making. Then when they get back, because there's no script and they can't control the environment or anything that happens. So when they get back to the cutting room, they may or may not have that movie, they may have no movie, or they may have a completely different movie. That's why I always say documentaries are not for the meek. Working in documentary is thoroughly and totally challenging on every level. And that's why I admire the filmmakers so much, because they're really incredibly brave. So, you know, they may be editing for a year. They may discover that they have to go shoot more stuff because the story changed. And now they have to fill it up with other footage, you know, that works with the new story. So because it goes on for a long time, oftentimes the composer isn't involved yet. I always tell my filmmakers, I'd love to be involved as early as you have anything, because if I start giving them ideas and we start developing back and forth what's working as the editor's cutting, then they'll end up using my music as the temp, music specifically that's intended for this film, which I love, because then I'm part of the filmmaking team. We're really going, you know, thoroughly going. But
So
oftentimes,
sorry. No,
well,
please go ahead.
oftentimes I don't get it until they've got a rough cut, or, you know, so whenever they're ready for me, I'm very happy to jump in. The sooner the better, usually.
So walk us a bit through now, you know, especially for the people that want to get into doc filmmaking or scoring for docs. So you got this footage now. We just saw this swing children's playground, the guy walking there. And now you're going to meet with the director. And what are the first questions you would ask to that scene?
Well, if I only just saw the footage and didn't know what the scene was, I'd want to know, what's the story? What is the narrative that you want to tell? And how can I help? So you know, he could say, or she could say, this guy is you know, he just got out of prison, and the first thing he does is go back to the playground. So we want to let the audience know he's a bad guy. Or you might say to me, you know, he came back to his old neighborhood where he grew up. He's very nostalgic. He remembers how that playground was there. Or maybe he had a son that died. And you know, I mean, it could be anything. And the music that I put will really help, especially if it's that opening scene. It will determine what the audience, the premise, you know, where they start, their point of departure, their foundation for understanding the film.
So let's watch the first scene, and you will see the difference. And, you know, we saw the footage, which is kind of, you know,
it could be anything.
Neutral. It could be anything. But I think we'll see how the music, and especially it could set up the tone for the next 90 minutes, and how important the music is, especially in doc filmmaking, because it's a color. Without that, I think it's just such a plain field.
Yeah, and also for your viewers to know that these are just cues from my library that I wrote for other films. I didn't write it for this, but when I take another kind of emotional story arc and put it on this, it determines what the story is to a great degree.
So let's pick, we have a total of 5 clips. So let's just start with the first. So that was the first option. So walk us through that a little bit, please.
Well, you tell me, what did you feel when you watched it? Did you like the guy?
Well, I have to say, this for me was not as creepy as others, I thought. We'll see them later.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sort of suggests a bit of emotional turbulence. So this guy has a reason to be there. He doesn't look like he's happy.
No.
Maybe it's stirring up old memories. Maybe he got beat up on that playground every day of his life. Or maybe, you know, he's staking out something, you know, like maybe he's going to kidnap somebody or whatever. So I think there's just it's an unidentified turbulence, I think, but it's definitely dark.
And what are the notes you usually get from directors, and how do you find? I know some directors you've worked several times with before, some are new. How do you find the language in with a filmmaker for music? I mean, you've been in the business for so long. Is there advice you also give? Can you help directors? Is there some questions you can ask to get out what you need?
Yes, I think the most important thing is that I know the information I need to do my job. So I can be proactive in the discussion. And I usually try to set them at ease. Some are more comfortable talking about music. I mean, but every director, I promise you, every director will react or respond in some way to the music. So the first thing I say, well, am I telling the right story? Did you think that worked? And then I get them to talk about the story. I don't need them to tell me about the music. I need them to tell me if I'm telling the right story. That's the most important information I can get. Now, that given, if they have specific ideas about where they want it to start or how they want it to evolve, maybe they would say something like, you know, I'd really like it to start lighter and then leave us creepy at the very end, because that would sort of make people sort of settle in and feel okay. And then suddenly we give them a question mark at the end of the scene. So those are the kinds of really useful discussions. You know, what is your intention? What would work? Sometimes just putting music there will help them see the scene in a whole new way. Like they didn't even see what I saw in it. And that's where a composer can add something to the discussion also, is that a director may not be aware that something's not clear or that there's a creepy element that they may want to maybe foreshadow, but just in a very subtle way. You know, maybe the music can suggest, you know, like I said, if I just have a low tone at the end, then we could talk about now how we want to escalate and where it should happen. And we can actually pace it out so that it's perfectly, you know, perfectly creating the right mood, communicating the right storyline and hitting with what we see on screen or not, you know. So all these things, you know, I can't read their mind. Sometimes I nail it the first time because I just get it. Sometimes it takes 20 tries. And I always tell them, we're gonna work on the first 15 minutes of your film until I get it right, until I'm telling, because now from then on, I'm gonna be building on the ideas that work. So there's no point in me cruising through this film and going in wrong directions, because also for them, it's so new. Maybe there was temp music in there that's been in for like 6 months and they're kind of having to shake it. Sometimes that's really hard for them. And sometimes they go, oh my God, I can't believe how much better this is. Now I see. And then they get excited because they see the power. If they can learn how to direct me, I can give them exactly tweaked to the nanosecond what they want, you know, and that's my desire. I want it to be something that captures exactly what they want, because I'm working with them because I think they do good work. And I want to help them, you know, in any way I can to tell their story the way they want to.
And I think that's such a great advice. I like that to not even work on the whole film. And I mean, to really do the first 10, 15 minutes and make sure you're on the same page. The tone is set for the film, because then I'm sure it makes it so much easier for the additional 75.
You don't end up working for 3 weeks and throwing half of it out, you know. And in fact, this film I've been working on now, it's called Beauty Isn't Pretty. And we've been having the most fun because it's just me, the director, and a producer, and the producer editor. And so we're really going through every cue very thoroughly, because it's a very unusual, the construction of the film is kind of unusual, and it could really, like the music is really important in organizing all these ideas. So we've really just stayed on each cue, and it's been really fun because now I'm on the last cue and almost everything's done. You know, they have a few tweaks and I have to reconform, but we've really established what the sound universe of the film is for the music. Because otherwise I get really confused. What am I doing? You know, I don't even understand what I'm trying to do. Is when I sit down, if I have more questions than answers, then I need to call them and we need to talk. Because if I'm just sitting there, then from then on I'm guessing. And I really don't know. Now, sometimes nobody knows. We don't know. And we're actually discovering it together, which is also really cool. If they're into the spirit of that, you just have to surrender to the process, you know. And some films are easier to figure out than others. So, you know, now, I mean, every film is totally different. Every group of people I work with is totally different. And you have to be very flexible and be able to work in different ways with different people. You know, but the good news is, since I'm older and I've been doing this a long time, usually I'm almost always older than my directors. And so I'm able to share experiences that I've had with them, you know, and help guide them so that they can enjoy the experience and not be freaking out. They really shouldn't freak out. It's really incredible experience.
I like that you really, you know, as a collaborator, you want to make the other party feel comfortable and taken care of. And I think you are really good at that.
Well, it's really a difficult process for them. I know for me, let's say I've been working on something, so I write all this music and then it's time to record. I bring in some incredible musicians, they start playing, and they suddenly do something I didn't expect. And it sort of makes my head explode because I'm like, wow, that's musically really outstanding. Now, how is it for the film? So in that situation, what I'll do is I'll record it the way that it was approved. And I'll offer this option because I think it's improved. And but I tell you, there's all kinds of surprising things that happen in the studio, even with string parts that are written out. Yeah, I mean, there's so much nuance in a real player. You know, my patches, my sound bites and sound files, they just sound how they sound. But when you get a real player, you get just the decay of a real player letting go of a note. I can't tell you the difference it makes in the music. It's so, I usually sit there going, I can't wait to hear that note decay naturally instead of, you know, ending the way it does with, you know, a sample. Oh, I lost your sound.
Let's listen to another scene. We like him a little better than the first one, but then at the end, I was not sure anymore.
Yeah, there's a little tiny downturn at the end. It feels very nostalgic to me.
Yeah, like that's what I thought in the beginning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe he's thinking about something good there. Like he's not sure, you know, he comes home, he's not really sure how he feels about his childhood. Some good memories, but towards the end, it seems like he's sort of like, I don't think I want to stay here. I'm leaving. I'm going to go back where I came from.
So do you talk about intention early on also before you start working on it, or do you always get the intention by the footage that you see? Is it always very clear, or?
It could be either way. I mean, maybe sometimes I'll sit down and, I mean, I find if I go out and drink beer with the director and just talk about the film, or other times they just send it to me ahead of time and I watch it and then we might talk about it, you know. As long as I mean, it can be different ways. Different people are comfortable relating to the composer in different ways. Some people bring you in as a friend, you know, part of the team. Others are like, you're over there and they send you stuff and get stuff back. So it's just whatever they want it to be. I know how to make up the difference because I've been doing this for over 30 years. So
has it happened to you that you worked, let's say on the first 15 minutes at least, and then showed it and you were totally off, like you saw it in a totally different way?
Yeah, but I never consider that a waste because there might be a place for it later in the film. Or once, I find it's so much easier to talk about music when you have something to talk about. Like, I'd rather send them a cue that's all wrong and start talking about why it's wrong, because that's easier for them to be able to be specific. They could say, no, that's the wrong instrument. It just doesn't fit. I don't like that sound. Or they could say, it needs to be faster. It needs to be faster. So now they have something to talk about, and it's much easier. So I would always recommend, even if you're not sure, and now I always say to them, I'm going to send you stuff because I need your feedback. And so it may be wrong, it may not, but don't feel bad. Like the people I'm working with now feel bad if they even give me one rewrite. I can't believe it. I'm so used to doing many rewrites. So, some films just go easier. I get into it sooner, but it's very important to just be natural and open and be able to really talk about this stuff. Like it's not an indication that I'm not a good composer. I can do whatever you want, but I have to understand what I'm trying to do. Most of us are that way.
Have you ever in your career taken feedback or critique on music personal? And if so, what changed so you don't take it personal anymore?
Oh my God. When I was young, it was everything was precious and personal. That's why that's one of the reasons I really love teaching or mentoring now, because I wasted many years in anguish. And once I understood some of these things, I realized it was not me. I'm good at what I do, but I need to get the kind of information I need. And I need to learn how to do that. So I try to, I was crushed many times. I felt like, I used to race to do the whole movie and then go show it to them, and then they're in the position of, oh my God, this person just came back after 2 months and showed me this thing and I don't like any of it, or I just like 2 things. That's not a way to collaborate. They have to be participants. And in fact, I don't want to work with people who don't want to participate. If they care about their film, they have to care about their music, because the music can really ruin the film. And I've seen many, many documentaries, especially really high caliber docs with shitty music or music that does nothing to enhance the storytelling and sometimes actually works against it. So that's not, I don't see any point in creating a score like that. I'd rather not do it, So I think it's really important that people understand the power of music and that they participate, or they'll turn their film over and let the composer direct the music and they'll get what they get,
Well, let's see what we get next. We have the third of 5 scenes. So let's see what that says. tell us, what I liked here is, the suspension and the actual, like there was so little music in the beginning, and I wanted more and more and more. I kind of wanted from the music, I wanted to understand more. So can you tell us also how sometimes less is more?
Oh, definitely. Well, first of all, you probably noticed the less is happening in the music, it slows down time. So the scene feels longer. So if you want it to feel kind of endless or longer, that's a good way to stretch out time, is to have very little going on, a very slow melody line, very slow development. If you feel like a scene is going too slow, I can make it feel like it's cruising along by doing faster music or having inner parts that, anything that adds energy. So these are all ways you can use music to, to influence how the viewer is experiencing what they're seeing and how they're understanding it. So this one, it has a very dark, I felt like this might have been the scene of a crime. Maybe he had a child that died on that, on that swing, and he's just going back there and like, so it really, it's very dark, but it's not like he's dangerous or creepy. It's more like his internal. That's the other thing. Whose point of view is the music? Is it outside the character, or are we now inside the character where he's feeling, this is what he's feeling, that it's a very, very, very tragic kind of place.
And who makes that decision? Is that something that you offer, or that the director tells you from the get-go? Or, like, do you talk about viewpoints in documentary, or are you informed by the footage?
No, it's very important. A director, just like a director has to direct where to point the camera, they have to direct, the editor. They have to make sure that the story's being told. They usually have an intention for the meaning of the footage, but sometimes I can make a suggestion, as I said before, where we're able to, that I've seen something in their own footage that they didn't notice. Now that can be good or bad or ugly, but you need to have the openness to be able to talk about all those things, because I might be responding to something and then they can either like it or not like it, but I'm responding to something when I do it. So that usually the composer is, besides the editor, I'm the first person that sees the film starting to be put together. So, getting outside feedback, when you work on something for a long time with two people in the room and nobody else sees it, even if there's three people, the first time someone else experiences it, you get a real sense of how well it's communicating your ideas, or if it's doing what you thought it was doing. And if there's a way to take what's there and tease out the things you want it to be doing. And music is the perfect solution, music and sound, because you can really determine the point of view, you can determine, the emotional space of the character, or sometimes, like I said, it's outside the character and it's more of a narrative of what's going on. So the music can be commenting, or it can be reflecting, or it can be adding. There's so many ways to use it. So it's a very powerful tool. And in the wrong hands, it's deadly.
Or especially, you can tell a completely different story in documentary.
Oh, yeah. You really mess up the film. The director's vision will just get lost in it because there's too many cooks, So that's why it's very important that there be mutual respect. Especially composers have to understand that this is a person, especially with docs. Sometimes they mortgage their home. Sometimes they're in a war zone where they're risking their actual life. They are doing serious stuff. I need to respect what they're doing and really get behind them, support it.
So let's watch the next scene. Let's see what's happening here.
know, it's really interesting. You can tell that, like, by what I chose to put on here, you can tell that I already sort of had an idea about the footage just from looking at it. So this is the kind of thing that will happen when a composer first looks at it and starts writing. That I have a definitely, you don't hear any like pop type stuff. You don't hear any silly music, because when I put it on, I actually tried a lot of different things, but it didn't work so badly that I didn't even go there. So there's a certain kind of range of dark, you know, of like nostalgic to dark, or sad or tragic to dark, that I just did instinctively. And that's kind of how it would work when you're working with a filmmaker, you know, like I have an instinct that based on what I see. And sometimes they'll come back and say, well, I really want you to make this, you know, sadder. And I'd say, but I don't see it. I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me. Maybe it needs to be more subtle. You know, that's another, so music is so nuanced. You have to be able to get into the real details of it and understand how to flesh it out and make it feel right with what we see, because the intention might be certain, like, Miriam, I want that to look funny. That guy is a clown, but I'm not seeing it. Are you? How would I make you a clown in that shot? It just isn't there in the shot. So that's another important thing that has to be discussed. You may need to reshoot that if you want it to be funny. Because I can push it funny all the way, but it'll never be funny. It'll just be false. So people have an instinct for what's authentic and what, you know, what you can get away with. I never want to go beyond what I think is that I can actually successfully execute, you know.
Yeah, but I think, you know, I think that probably also comes with experience to be able to verbalize that. And you know, I also think, you know, for young composers, it takes a lot of confidence also to say, I know you want that funny, but I, as the viewer, don't really see it. So we have to kind of look at it, or maybe do something in editing, but I can only go so far in music, so it still feels authentic to the.
Right.
But I think it takes a lot of experience and confidence to verbalize that.
Yeah, and you know, it's really important to establish, but because I'm older and experienced, I'm able to put others at ease. And I find there's many ways I do it. You know, I become very non-threatening, and I don't get upset if they like changes and stuff. And I think
you could never be threatening anyway, even if you tried.
I know, that's what my dog trainer says. I'm not an alpha. But you know, I think that, and I work to do that. I want to create an atmosphere where they're comfortable, and then eventually asking me my opinion, because my opinion can matter, but it doesn't matter if they don't agree. You know, I will do the best I can, but I guess my fallback is, I always say, I would never want to create something that hurts your movie. And this, I believe, will hurt your movie, you know? So either we need to do something to, you know, reshoot it, or, you know, maybe edit it differently, or ask. And another thing I'll say, well, show it to some other people and ask them. But the truth is, sometimes I have to show them what it would be. And that's okay. You know, they have to just experience it with their own eyes. And most of the time, they understand once they see it, because they can feel that it's wrong. I mean, there are people trying to do something authentic, and they can feel that it's fake, you know. So I think, you know, whatever way it takes for me to kind of work it through with them, then I do it. Now, if we reach a real, like, if they just don't care and they want it, then I kind of suggest I'm not really the right composer. Because the last thing I'll ever do, I'd rather leave a job than, you know, do something that would hurt their movie.
Well, I think that also takes a lot to say that, and to say, hey, you know.
I wouldn't have done that 20 years ago.
No, but I think, you know, that, and we'll talk about that later, but that has a lot to do with integrity, and your integrity also, and your view of the industry also. But let's talk about that in a little bit. I want to watch the last of the 5 scenes now. Let's see what the next is.
one of the things I noticed when I was watching that is another thing I really love to share with people is that within the visuals, like we don't have dialogue here. If we did, it would be part of it. There is so much rhythm going on. There's the swing. There's like kids walking, somebody walks across, there's the sound of this little celeste thing in the background, a toy box or something. There's, there's other sound like a car going by. This is all the rhythm of the scene, and finding the sweet spot for the composer is really great, where you have something that's sort of like, I didn't write anything for this. This is all just stuff I have. And so I would pull it up and I would feel like it was working. Why is it working? Because when the swing starts swinging, the music picks up. It just does it, and so it feels like it's all in a rhythm. And so it creates this flow. And when there's dialogue, that comes, and then someone walks across the scene, and I find those little ways of kind of the music can poke out sometimes, and sometimes it's just inside, but it feels right. It's just all feeling. And I think most musicians know that from playing in bands. When you're all locked in and your intention is all the same, and the rhythm, and I pick up my horn and do something, and somebody else takes off from that. You know what I mean? And it's like a handoff. So all these things, I think playing live, I was in bands for 20 years. Playing live really affects how I use music, because I really used to audiences reacting right then in the moment, to what we did. So you see the effect of the music, and then it's kind of a maturity that happens when you become a film composer. You actually instinctively know that stuff because you've been on stage watching people react, for 20 years. So I think it's really, I say to young composers, if you don't have the opportunity to play live, go see live music, and experience it for yourself. What happens when a performer does different stuff, and how the people, how the flow gets going, because music is all about the flow. It's rhythm and then this melody floating over it. And so anyway, it's all, it's such a visceral experience.
Before we finish this conversation, I want to talk a little bit, and you talked a little bit about your career, from performing in bands, but I know, how rewarding it is to write for documentaries, and that for you it was really important to find your path within the film music industry, and not only to find it, but you created your path that is fulfilling, that feeds you artistically, but also on an activism level. And so everything comes together. And can you talk about that and about the importance, and especially for young composers who are going into film scoring, and how important the passion is, and to finding what is yours?
Oh, definitely. That's one of the things I've noticed as I've been mentoring. I've been mentoring for a long time, and the younger filmmakers today, the younger composers, future composers, they're very. It's very important to them that they. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to go write beer commercials because it really satisfies my soul, or I want to go play in a mall, or I want to go play in a disco. Maybe some people do, but I think most of us are artistically inclined. And so you get to a point where you just want to do music all the time, and you just have to figure out how the hell you're going to support yourself. That's really how I started doing it. I was like, I don't know, I have to figure out a way to support myself, because I really want to just sit home and do music all day, all the time. So that's where it starts for most of us. And I didn't learn this till much later in my career. When I started out, after I gave up performing and realized that this was my passion, I hadn't discovered my passion for documentaries, but I was just so enamored of writing, even for bad horror movies and stuff. I did a ton of them, and wall-to-wall music, and just huge electric guitars and orchestras, and so one day I woke up after 10 years of doing that and doing industrials, and mostly stuff that didn't resonate for me. I just thought, I'm solvent now, but I'm miserable. Like, nothing I'm doing, there's nothing I want to show anybody, except I was writing for this wonderful circus. That was the only artistic thing I was doing. And so I decided I was going to stop doing it, because I just thought, this is just killing my soul. I'd rather go do something else for money and just do music at home. And so that's the night I met, very soon after I met this filmmaker, Arthur Dong, who had made this incredible documentary. I did a few docs, but not anything important. And then his documentary was about he went and interviewed men who were imprisoned for murdering gay men. And it was like staggering to hear those guys talk about why they did it and why they felt they should, and were entitled to. And of course, then it went to Sundance, and he took me to Sundance with him. And I had this whole experience where I suddenly saw this community of documentary filmmakers that were like, oh, the work was incredible. We share values. They cared very deeply about the material. And I realized that that's what I should do, combine my passion for, I want to contribute to making the world better. And I also am very naturally a musician and want to be doing music, so that's how it happened for me. So I always tell young people, whatever your passion is, if it's games, if it's tentpole Marvel movies, whatever it is, figure out what makes you really happy doing it. Because if you end up doing something you don't really want to do, then you're not going to ever be happy, even if you're rich and famous. But if you figure out what really inspires you, I'm pretty old now, and I'm still never lose my inspiration for what I'm doing, because it's just passionate for me. And it's like I'll do anything to actualize and make it a good project, So, you don't want to spend your life, I always used to ask myself, when I get older and I look back, and I'm in my 60s and I look back, what am I going to think about my decisions? And I can tell you that for me, I have no regrets at all. I've done the life I wanted to live, and I've done music I'm really proud of, and worked with people I admire, and so what better life is there for an artistic person than to feel like you've found your, thing? But it didn't exist. I found it, and I created it for myself. And nowadays, that's kind of what we have to do. We have to be entrepreneurial and wear a lot of hats and figure out how to monetize this stuff. It's getting harder, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but I love it because I really think you carved your career.
I definitely carved it with a
and
machete.
That's a whole nother conversation we can have another time. But also, how you worked with keeping the rights and
Yes.
and all that. But that is another conversation we have. But I think you shared really great wisdom today, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so is there someone who wants to go into documentary, scoring for documentary? What is like the top advice you would give them?
Well, when I realized what I wanted to do, I wanted to become part of the documentary community. I mean, sure, I can hang out with other composers and musicians and engineers and stuff, but my passion is their work, the documentary filmmakers. And so I made it my business to just get to know as many as I could and network and, going to film festivals and seeing the work and, being in Q&As and learning about what motivates people and being authentically interested, in the work that's happening. I know that over the last maybe 10 years, a lot of people have become more interested, young composers. They're finding it's more of an artist lifestyle. I feel like I have an artist life. Even though I do deadlines and stuff, it's really about the work and, and achievement, high achievement on their end and my end. And so we just match up really well. So I think it's really, figure out where you want to be and then be very creative. Creativity isn't just for music. You need to take your creativity and focus it on your life. What kind of a life do you want to live? How do you want, what really matters to you? Is it getting the big, is it getting an Academy Award? Which I'm not going to lie, there was a long time in my life where I thought that's what I want to get. I want to be the first woman. Well, that passed me by, but I'm still really happy, even though I don't have an Academy Award. But it's okay because I work with on Academy-nominated films and stuff. So I mean, that's fine with me, So yeah, my advice is, if you have a feel for something, like didn't always know what I was looking for, but I kept my eyes open, and when I felt something, I went, that feels like me. That feels right. And I just went full tilt for that, you know. So there's plenty of room to move around in our business. There's so many different kinds of content. You know, there's so many opportunities. I mean, what I'm seeing now, this explosion of streaming, so many people are working on streaming on popular shows on Netflix and stuff. You know, I mean, that was getting a TV gig was really hard when I was coming up. So now there's all these other opportunities, but the biggest challenge is the monetization, because the royalties are lower on streaming, and you know that's a whole conversation. But you have to have a business model of some kind. It's not going to just magically happen. You can't do a good job with your music budget if you have to also pay your mortgage and you know whatever else you have going on and put food on the table for your family. Suddenly you only have $5,000 instead of $30,000 to spend on musicians. See what I mean? You have to figure out how to make that bigger.
And that's getting more and more difficult. And I just want to point out there is this panel is in collaboration with the Alliance for Film Composers. And if you go on their YouTube, there is also a video on Real Change that we videotaped a few weeks ago. So check that out, because that talks exactly about monetization and streaming services. So check out this video. And I just want to thank you, Miriam, for taking the time, for sharing your wisdom. You're very inspiring, and thank you for doing that with us.
Let's go on a trip again.
And let's go on a trip again.
Soon.
Definitely. And for our audiences, check out Perspective Forum on Facebook, join them. And for more videos, check out filmmusichouse.com and check out the Flannery score on Spotify. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, Miriam.
Bye, Thomas.